What if the billion-dollar business model you studied yesterday, the one that powered decades of growth and secured massive market share, became completely irrelevant overnight?
It's a terrifying thought.
hmm
Imagine, for a moment, you're the leader of an iconic century-old auto company.
Let's call them global motors.
Right, Global Motors, a company that built its entire identity, its whole reputation, on the roar of a combustion engine.
On mechanical drivetrains, precision physical engineering, their expertise was in metal, hydraulics, all that tangible stuff.
Exactly. And then you suddenly realize that your continued success, your very survival, now hinges entirely on lines of software code.
On managing enormous data sets, not on pistons and transmissions. What do
Right.
you do when the entire foundation of your company just shifts from under your feet?
It's not just an upgrade, it's a full-blown existential question.
And that tension, that mix of chaos and opportunity, that was the reality for the CIO at Global Motors in our opening vignette.
It really was. One day, they experienced the absolute peak of this new paradigm's promise. Their first fully autonomous vehicle fleet completes 100,000 incident-free miles.
Amazing.
Algorithms are updating over the cloud in real time. That's the validation right there. The future of transportation is digital.
But then the other shoe drops.
It always does. The very next month, the terrifying flip side of that digital shift becomes a brutal reality.
The over-the-air
A
update.
flawed over-the-air software update nearly immobilized thousands of their flagship electric sedans,
Wow.
created a massive safety recall that, software patches couldn't fix instantly.
The company that used to worry about loose belts and bad fuel pumps is now scrambling to stabilize code.
And a security vulnerability or a software bug is now a physical safety crisis. It's a regulatory nightmare.
The rules of the game have fundamentally changed.
That's it, exactly. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to go deep into the source material. Chapter 2 of Emerging Technologies and Innovation Strategy, an information systems approach for the digital era.
We're going to be dissecting the foundational frameworks that help us and help you as future business leaders and IS professionals to understand, anticipate, and manage these revolutionary technological changes.
We're extracting the strategies you'll need to lead confidently through this kind of upheaval. It's not just about recognizing incremental change.
No, it's about understanding a change in the entire operating system of your industry.
We want to give you the intellectual tools to distinguish between, fleeting hype and real lasting disruption, and to position yourself for success in this incredibly dynamic environment.
So if you're a student in MIS, CIS, IT, or really any field of business, this discussion is designed to turn that uncertainty into a strategic insight.
Absolutely. And because the insights we're about to share are, they're designed to immediately position you for a bright future in your chosen career, we really encourage you now in these first few moments to hit that like button.
Subscribe and share this deep dive. You don't want to miss the practical, strategic tips we're about to unpack.
And to make sure you check the description below, we've got links to additional resources that complement today's discussion and offer even more context for your studies.
All right, let's dig in. Where do we start to define this kind of revolution?
We have to start with the source, with the man who gave us the language to even discuss it.
The term paradigm shift gets thrown around so much today, doesn't it?
Oh, constantly. It's become so diluted. Marketing teams use it for a new phone feature.
Right, or politicians for every new policy. Every startup claims they're a paradigm shift.
But its original precise meaning is so much more profound. And to really lead during a disruption, you have to start there.
With the intellectual foundation.
Exactly. Laid by Thomas Kuhn.
We absolutely need to reset the definition.
We do. Thomas Kuhn was a historian and a philosopher of science, and he published The Structure of Scientific Revolutions way back in 1962.
And it wasn't just some dusty academic book, was it?
Not at all. It fundamentally challenged the conventional wisdom of the time. The idea that science just progresses by, neatly accumulating new facts in a straight line.
He argued that progress is actually nonlinear. It's punctuated by these radical revolutionary shifts.
Shifts that change the very way we see the world, not just what we see in it.
And the central concept he introduced is the paradigm.
And as you said, it's so much more than just a new idea. In Kuhn's very precise usage, the paradigm is the entire reigning model.
The whole kit and caboodle?
Pretty much. It's the comprehensive set of core assumptions, the accepted theories, the established methodologies, the common language.
Even the successful examples that everyone points to.
Exactly, what he called exemplars. They define a scientific or a professional field at any given time.
So it's the agreed upon operating system for an entire industry or field of study.
That's a great way to put it. It dictates what measurements matter, what counts as a legitimate problem to solve.
And what questions are even considered valid to ask in the first place?
Precisely. And for long periods, fields are engaged in what he called normal science.
Okay, so what's normal science?
This is the long, stable, and actually highly productive period where researchers or practitioners, they aren't questioning the foundation at all.
They're just solving puzzles within the established paradigm.
Right, they're refining the details, confident that the basic assumptions are totally sound. Think of it as incremental improvement.
So if you're a mechanical engineer at Global Motors in the 1990s,
You are 100% confident in the laws of thermodynamics and combustion. You are just trying to make the engine maybe 5% more efficient. You're tweaking the system.
but then the system starts showing cracks.
Then you get anomalies. These are findings, observations, or, in the business world, market realities that simply do not fit the prevailing paradigm.
They defy explanation using the current set of tools or theories.
And at first, these are dismissed. They're worked around or maybe filed away as an experimental error or just put in the too hard pile.
But the source material really stresses that these anomalies, they accumulate, they don't go away.
They grow more significant, more numerous, and more persistent. And then suddenly, they trigger what Kuhn called a crisis of confidence.
The old rules aren't just inefficient anymore. They are actively failing.
That confident certainty that marked normal science just erodes. And those foundational assumptions, like the inherent value of a physical storefront in retail,
Or the necessity of owning all your own IT infrastructure.
all of that is suddenly questioned. And the chaos that follows, that intellectual and organizational turmoil, is what opens the door for radical fringe theories.
For the disruptive startups to gain traction.
And the revolutionary shift is that moment when the new framework emerges. It offers a more elegant, a more powerful explanation for all those anomalies that have been piling up.
And it completely replaces the old paradigm.
It's a conversion, not a modification. It is the moment the worldview transforms, forcing everyone who wants to remain relevant to adopt the new structure.
The source material highlights a really crucial and I think often misunderstood concept related to these transitions.
Ah, yes. Incommensurability.
Exactly. And this is key to understanding why so many big, successful companies fail.
This concept is incredibly deep and so relevant to the business world. Kuhn argued that the old and new paradigms are often incommensurate.
Meaning,
They are so fundamentally different in their assumptions, their standards, even their basic vocabulary, that the people who believe in the old paradigm literally talk past the people who are championing the new one.
they're using the same words but defining reality in a completely different way.
Precisely. So if a Blockbuster executive defines success by store traffic and late fees,
They simply couldn't comprehend the value of Netflix.
because Netflix defines success by customer convenience and lifetime subscription value, the metrics and assumptions were totally incommensurate. They couldn't even have a meaningful conversation.
It's like they were operating in different realities.
Let's look at the classic scientific case. Think about the Copernican revolution. For centuries, the geocentric or Earth-centered Ptolemaic paradigm was the rule.
Right. Everything revolves around the Earth.
And it was complex, It required endless adjustments to orbits, epicycles,
Yeah.
but it worked well enough to predict planetary motion.
And it also placed humanity literally and figuratively at the center of the cosmos, which was a comfortable idea.
Very. But the accumulated anomalies in planetary observation just grew too great. The math got too messy.
And then the shift to the sun-centered or heliocentric model, championed by Copernicus and Galileo.
That wasn't just a mathematical tweak. It reframed humanity's place in the universe. An astronomer clinging to the Ptolemaic view couldn't easily understand the Copernican model.
Because their foundational assumption that the Earth is stationary made all the new populations seem illogical.
They had to discard their entire worldview to even begin to understand it.
And that profound shift in worldview is what defines a true paradigm shift, whether it's in physics or information systems.
A true shift forces you to discard your most cherished, comfortable assumptions.
So the takeaway for you as an aspiring IS or business leader is absolutely critical here.
It is. When you encounter talk of a paradigm shift in your career, You have to ask yourself a key question.
Is this just an incremental improvement? Is it just making the existing car a little bit faster?
Or is it a Kuhnian shift, a complete transformation of the entire underlying assumption set?
Is it like Global Motors realizing that the entire basis of success has moved from mechanical efficiency to the ability to securely manage terabytes of real-time sensor data?
Recognizing that distinction is the first and most important step toward strategic leadership.
Okay, so we've established the deep academic meaning of a paradigm shift. Now let's look at how this plays out in the real world, how this revolutionary framework applies to industry and technology.
Right, and this brings in another key thinker, Joseph Schumpeter, and his concept of creative destruction.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Schumpeter argued that technological innovation isn't some outside force. It's an internal force that incessantly revolutionizes the economic structure from within,
It destroys the established order.
while creating the conditions for new, more powerful, and more relevant entities to rise.
And the blockbuster Netflix narrative is the textbook illustration of this, because it shows that organizational paralysis when faced with what you called incommensurability.
Exactly. So let's deepen the analysis of that famous case study. What exactly was the structure of the old paradigm for Blockbuster that made it so vulnerable?
Well, they were a behemoth, right?
Hmm?
Perfectly optimized for the technology of their time.
Perfectly. Their world was defined by physical assets, store locations on every corner, a complex supply chain for physical media managing millions of tapes and disks.
And a financial model that relied heavily on those high-margin late fees.
That's the key. Their profitability was tied directly to customer inconvenience. The model worked because it was a hassle for people.
And the source material points out that the first crack in that foundation wasn't even Netflix.
No, it was the DVD technology shift itself. DVDs were cheaper, more durable, and smaller than VHS tapes.
Which meant they were easier and more cost-effective for studios to just sell directly to consumers.
Which immediately eroded Blockbuster's exclusive rental window and put huge pressure on their margins.
And Blockbuster actually declined Warner Brothers' early offer to get into the DVD rental market.
They did. They viewed it merely as a logistical headache, not an existential threat,
Why?
because their mistake was applying the old paradigm's metric store traffic, late fees, to evaluate the new format. They were trapped by their own success. They believed their greatest asset was their physical real estate.
And then came the real business model shift.
Netflix, 1997. Their mail-order DVD subscription model was, at the time, completely radical.
You select your movies online, they come to your mailbox, it was all about convenience.
And the ultimate revolutionary act, no late fees.
That must have seemed like absolute madness to Blockbuster.
Total madness. This new model was built entirely on convenience and subscription revenue, a total counter-paradigm to Blockbuster's entire structure.
And that leads to the infamous story of Netflix offering to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million in 2000.
It's often framed as just a lack of vision, but it's much deeper than that. From their perspective, Blockbuster saw Netflix as a low-margin niche gimmick,
They just couldn't compute the value of a business that actively gave up late fees.
which was their most lucrative revenue stream. They were trying to understand a new language using the grammar of the old one. It was, again, incommensurable.
And then the final blow.
By 2007, Netflix anticipated the final lethal shift, the digital paradigm of streaming video.
This move leveraged high-speed internet-connected devices. It completely erased the need for physical assets.
And it displaced the store model entirely. Netflix was now instant, with infinite inventory completely on demand.
So the ultimate lesson for incumbents, especially for our business students listening, is what?
Blockbuster's extensive physical real estate footprint, which was once its greatest competitive advantage, instantly became a crushing liability in the new digital distribution paradigm.
They failed not because they lacked the technology. I mean, they did launch their own rental and streaming services eventually.
But they couldn't pivot without cannibalizing their core revenue stream. They chose short-term profit protection over long-term strategic evolution.
And that's a fatal mistake.
For you, as an information systems student, the lesson is paramount. Paradigm shifts demand organizational boldness.
And strategic cannibalization.
You have to be willing to dismantle what is currently working efficiently to adopt the future model, even if it feels terrifying.
We see this exact pattern repeated throughout the history of information systems, don't we? It demonstrates how technology fundamentally reframes the field itself.
Absolutely. Let's look at the shift from mainframe to personal computing.
Okay, so the mainframe paradigm, what was that all about?
It was all about centralization. Computing resources were specialized, immensely expensive, and controlled by what felt like a high priesthood of IT specialists in white lab coats.
Right, the keepers of the machine.
Then the PC paradigm introduced distributed power. Computing became cheap, accessible, and was placed on every single desk.
This democratized computing, didn't it? It shifted IS from being a centralized number-crunching function to an enabler of individual productivity and creativity.
Think of the rise of VisiCalc and Lotus 123. It was a revolution.
And the companies that were heavily invested in the old paradigm.
Companies like DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, they struggled immensely. They just couldn't believe that a toy PC could ever replace the power of their central iron.
Meanwhile, Microsoft and Intel redefined the entire ecosystem from the ground up.
Then came another profound shift, from on-premises to cloud computing.
So the previous paradigm required organizations to own, manage, and control their entire IT infrastructure.
Everything, from the wiring closet to the server room to the cooling systems, it was a massive capital expense.
In cloud computing, pioneered by AWS, Microsoft Azure, and others, it shifted IT to an outsourced utility model.
And this isn't just renting storage space. It's a fundamental strategic shift. It enables hyperscaling, elasticity, and much faster innovation.
Which changes what an IS department does every single day.
Completely. The focus moves from maintenance and keeping the lights on to architecture, governance, and strategy.
And the current ongoing shift, the one that will define the start of your career, is the integration of generative AI into knowledge work.
This is a classic potential paradigm shift. It challenges the fundamental assumption of the last 40 years of office work,
Which is?
that tasks like complex report writing, drafting code, or synthesizing large data sets require direct, continuous human intellectual effort.
Generative AI fundamentally shifts the division of labor. It moves it from human creation to human orchestration.
It's not just a new software tool. It's an intelligent co-creator that can reduce the time needed for a first draft from hours or days to virtually zero.
And the new skills required in this paradigm are completely different.
The value moves away from low-level execution and repetitive tasks, and it skyrockets toward, well, toward things like engineering effective prompts.
Asking the right questions.
Exactly. And verifying AI outputs for accuracy and hallucination. And critically, governing the ethical use of these powerful tools.
So the IS professional transforms from a technician into an orchestrator, a quality controller, and a strategic partner.
It's a true paradigm shift in professional identity.
So when a potentially revolutionary technology like this emerges, whether it was blockchain in 2017 or generative AI today or self-driving cars, how can we as strategic thinkers know if it's the real deal?
How do you know if it's the next paradigm shift or just a fleeting bubble that's destined to burst?
Exactly. We need objective tools to distinguish that fleeting hype from long-term lasting change.
We do. And you have to learn to track two distinctly different signals: the signal of public perception and media attention,
Which is the Gartner hype cycle,
and the signal of actual performance, adoption, and cost reduction.
the innovation S-curve.
Right. And the trick is that the two rarely align. The divergence between them is where you find your strategic edge.
Okay, let's start with the Gartner hype cycle. What is it tracking?
This model, which came about in the mid-1990s, maps the emotional and media trajectory of a new technology. It's an observer's tool, tracking expectation over time through 5 emotional stages.
Stage 1 is the technology trigger.
This is the initial breakthrough. The first patent, the foundational research paper, the initial unproven demo. It generates that first bit of media buzz and excitement.
Then things escalate quickly.
They climb rapidly to the peak of inflated expectations. This is where the media fanfare is just maximal.
You get grand, often unrealistic claims. This will solve world hunger. This will end traffic forever.
And venture capital floods the market. There's a strong fear of missing out, or FOMO. But crucially, the technology is often still highly immature and very expensive at this peak.
Then reality sets in.
And that leads inevitably to the trough of disillusionment. This is the backlash phase.
Early projects fail. Integration proves to be way harder than anyone thought. Costs are higher than anticipated.
And the media turns negative, proclaiming the technology a failure. Investment dries up, and only the most resilient players survive this period.
And this trough is where strategic patience is absolutely essential.
It is, because if the core technology is sound and it solves a real problem, it begins the slow, steady ascent of the slope of enlightenment.
This is where practical use cases start to solidify.
Right, what we might call minimum viable products, Limitations are understood, second and third generation products are better designed, and early adopters start reporting genuine, measured benefits and a realistic return on investment.
And finally, the technology reaches the plateau of productivity.
It's mature, it's standardized, it's mainstream, and it delivers real, accepted, predictable value. It's no longer a trend,
It's just a utility integrated into standard business processes.
like cloud computing or virtualization are today. Nobody talks about them as hype anymore. They just are.
Can we trace a technology through this cycle as an example?
Sure, think of virtual reality or VR. Its early iteration hit a massive peak around 2016, 2017. Everyone was talking about the metaverse.
Then it fell into a pretty deep trough of disillusionment. Costs were high, the hardware was clunky, mass adoption was very slow.
But now, VR and AR are slowly, quietly climbing the slope of enlightenment. They're finding highly specific, high-value enterprise use cases in things like surgical training, architectural design, and complex data visualization.
So that's the emotional side of the story. Now let's contrast this sharply with the innovation S-curve.
This model completely ignores public perception. It ignores the hype. It tracks actual adoption rates and performance growth over time.
This is reality.
The S-curve is reality. It starts with a flat, slow, early stage. The technology is expensive, performance is low, adoption is minimal. The technology is still just a curiosity.
Then, when the value is proven, economies of scale kick in, production costs drop.
It hits the rapid growth phase, that steep, accelerating slope of the S. This is the tipping point where mass adoption occurs and the old paradigm is rapidly displaced.
And finally, it hits the maturity phase, where the curve flattens out.
The market is saturated and the technology reaches its physical, theoretical, or practical performance limits. There's not much more juice to squeeze.
The profound strategic insight here, especially when we're talking about paradigm shifts, is the concept of stacked S-curves.
Right. The current, profitable, dominant paradigm represents one S-curve that is inevitably maturing. It's flattening out.
And the disruptive, emerging paradigm starts a fresh, steeper S-curve that, if it's successful, will inevitably overtake the old one.
Consider the performance of digital cameras. Early digital cameras were expensive and had terrible resolution. They were at the flat base of the S-curve.
But as sensor and memory technology improved, their S-curve accelerated rapidly, and they completely displaced film photography.
Now, that digital camera S-curve is itself being challenged by the even steeper S-curve of computational photography powered by our smartphones.
So the crucial point for you, the strategic learner, is connecting these two models. Where's the trap?
The strategic trap is that the peak of inflated expectations on the hype cycle often happens when the technology is still lingering flat at the bottom of the S-curve.
Expectations run way, way ahead of the engineering and integration reality.
Incumbents often dismiss a technology when it's still just hype. They look at the performance metrics, the S-curve, and it just doesn't justify massive investment.
So they wait. They wait until the technology is visibly accelerating up that steep slope, the actual tipping point.
But by then, the strategic window for competitive entry has slammed shut. It's too late.
So the proactive organization has to track both signals. And this is where the technical IS expertise is so important.
You can't just watch the news headlines. You have to monitor concrete performance metrics to spot when that S-curve is about to accelerate.
So what specific metrics should an IS student or a future business leader be tracking? Give us some examples of the tripwires we should be looking for.
Well, the metrics depend on the technology, but it always relate to efficiency and cost. For a hardware-based shift, you track total cost of ownership, or TCO reduction, or you track the cost per unit of output.
For example,
The cost per watt of solar energy, or the cost per kilowatt hour of battery storage. When that cost curve crosses a competitive threshold, say, it becomes cheaper than coal, the S-curve goes vertical almost overnight.
and what about for a software or an AI shift?
There you track things like throughput, latency, and accuracy. If generative AI's ability to correctly write functional code passes, let's say, a 90% benchmark,
And its query response time drops from 5 seconds to 1 second.
that's the signal.
Yep.
That is the sign that the S-curve is accelerating, and you have to pivot your internal skills investment immediately.
So the key is to be patient through the trough of disillusionment.
But be prepared to pivot aggressively when those objective performance metrics signal that reality is finally catching up with the earlier vision.
That proactive stance is the difference between being Blockbuster and being Netflix.
A paradigm shift is never purely technological, though. It's an organizational crisis. It fundamentally challenges expertise, culture, investment strategies,
and deeply entrenched power structures.
which is why the concept of the innovator's dilemma is so vital to understand.
Clayton Christensen's work. It explains precisely why successful incumbent organizations, full of smart, capable people, consistently struggle to adopt disruptive technologies.
Their processes, their culture, their investment cycles, everything is optimized for serving their existing, most profitable customers with the old paradigm.
And the new disruptive technology initially looks terrible to them.
It does. It's lower margin, it's less reliable, and it performs worse on the metrics the incumbents currently care about.
Kodak's high-margin film business was immensely profitable.
And digital photography was low margin, had poor resolution, and seemed like a direct threat to their core business.
So they failed because they were applying the old financial logic to the new technology.
They had two choices: embrace the disruptive technology and strategically cannibalize their current revenue.
Or protect their cash cow and watch a competitor or a new entrant do the cannibalization for them.
And most organizations choose the latter. They protect what's working now until it's far too late.
So to survive, organizations have to become strategically ambidextrous.
This is the key management concept: the ability to simultaneously exploit your current capabilities.
Keep the Global Motors mechanical core running efficiently, maximize profits from current combustion engine sales. That's Horizon 1.
While you strategically explore new opportunities, investing in the emerging digital EV platform, that's Horizon 3.
This requires specific organizational mechanics, right? You can't just tell people to do both.
No, you can't ask the manager, who is incentivized to maximize current engine sales, to also lead the charge on low-margin electric vehicles. Their goals are in direct conflict.
So successful ambidextrous organizations often separate their exploratory unit.
You might create entirely independent skunkworks or venture arms with separate legal structures, their own HR, their own profit and loss statements.
All designed to run according to the rules of the new paradigm.
And this protects the nascent disruptive idea from the performance metrics and the cultural pressure of the highly efficient legacy business.
Can you give us a contemporary example?
Sure, look at the legacy airline industry. They are excellent at exploiting the current paradigm-efficient jet travel, complex scheduling.
But the paradigm shift towards sustainable fuels or hydrogen propulsion or even electric regional travel, that's Horizon 3 stuff.
So to explore this, they partner with specific green tech startups or form small independent ventures, shielding them from the core business's pressure to maintain high daily utilization rates.
So the core business exploits, the venture arm explores.
And this brings us right back to the elevated role of IS leadership.
The CIO or the CTO in an era of paradigm shifts is no longer just a technical manager.
They have to transcend those operational roles to become true change leaders and orchestrators for the entire organization.
They become the interpreters of the shift.
Their job involves educating the entire C-suite and the board about the implications of the emerging technology, translating those technical metrics into strategic risks and opportunities.
That requires immense soft skills: communication, influence, vision.
And crucially, they're responsible for massive internal talent shifts. They have to identify what new skills are needed,
Data science, security automation, prompt engineering.
and then execute widespread reskilling and hiring efforts. If Global Motors needs 1,000 software engineers next year, the CIO has to deliver that talent.
And manage the culture clash between the old mechanical experts and the new digital natives.
And tying it back to the vignette, IS leaders must also become protectors and navigators.
The Global Motors security scare highlights that as products become software-defined and connected, the new paradigm, new risks, become physical safety risks.
Cyber vulnerabilities, supply chain dependencies, system failures. The IS function is now responsible for navigating the new regulatory scrutiny that comes with all of these connected products and services.
But we can't discuss the organizational impact without addressing the human element.
The resistance and fear that these shifts always generate.
This is critical change management.
Employees who have invested their entire careers in the old paradigm, the mechanical engineers, the data center technicians, the film developers at Kodak,
They often feel that their skills are becoming irrelevant.
and this fear leads to organizational resistance, slow adoption, and sometimes even active sabotage.
So leadership have to acknowledge this fear, show empathy, and articulate a clear path forward.
And while Schumpeter's creative destruction does eliminate old roles, it simultaneously creates new, often higher value ones.
So the strategic response is heavy investment in training and upskilling.
And following models like Kotter's change management, where the first and most vital step is always creating a sense of urgency.
You have to vividly demonstrate why the paradigm shift makes change necessary, even if the current business is wildly successful.
Global Motors had to show their mechanical teams that their domain expertise was still vital, but only when it was integrated into a new software platform.
Finally, let's consider the external tension these shifts create.
The regulatory lag, the pacing problem.
Laws, standards, and rules are always designed for the world that was, not the world that's coming.
And when a paradigm shift hits, lawmakers and regulatory bodies just scramble to catch up. Think of the liability issues around autonomous vehicles.
Who's responsible in an accident? The owner, the manufacturer, the software company that wrote the code?
Existing insurance and traffic laws were not designed for this complexity.
Historically, we saw this with the 19th century red flag laws that required someone to walk in front of early automobiles.
They were driven by legitimate safety concerns, but their effect was to slow the adoption of the automotive paradigm.
And today, we see this pacing problem in AI governance, data privacy, drone technology, you name it.
So strategic leadership demands active policy engagement. Successful organizations don't just wait for regulators to catch up.
They engage proactively, they lobby for sensible, innovation-friendly regulation, they join standard-setting groups.
Or they self-regulate by establishing things like internal AI ethics panels to guide the shift and preempt overly strict government intervention that could stifle the new paradigm before it even gets going.
So if these paradigm shifts are like earthquakes for the business world, then you, the IS professional, you need the tools to see the seismic activity coming long before the ground actually shakes.
You have to move from being reactive to being proactive.
So what does this all mean for your career path? You need tools for strategic foresight.
And the goal of foresight is not precise prediction. That's impossible. The goal is to sense, anticipate, and prepare for a range of possibilities to minimize strategic surprise.
And that starts with horizon scanning and weak signals.
Horizon scanning is the systematic process of monitoring the periphery. You're looking outside your immediate competitive environment.
So for car companies, that means not just looking at other car companies.
Right, you're searching for weak signals.
That's a weak signal.
Weak signals are subtle, early indicators that a major shift is forming outside your traditional arena. They might be an obscure patent filing in a non-related field, a small funding round for an unusual startup,
Or an academic paper proposing a radical new physics approach.
Traditional competitive intelligence completely misses these signals.
Can you give an example?
Think back to the early 2000s. A weak signal from major retail might have been the incredibly low cost of building massive, scalable distributed databases, like the ones being developed by Google or Amazon at the time.
So retailers focusing only on their physical store competition.
They missed the signal that a new competitor could build an infinitely large online store at a negligible cost.
And because the future trajectory of a paradigm shift is so uncertain, we have to use scenario planning.
This technique forces leaders to create a small, manageable set of plausible, often contrasting future scenarios to stress test their current strategies.
The value isn't in picking the right scenario,
but in being prepared for the range of possibilities. For instance, a major energy company shouldn't just plan for slow EV adoption.
No, they have to create a scenario matrix. What would that look like?
High global EV adoption, low grid investment.
Oh.
Low EV adoption, high hydrogen investment.
Yeah.
And high EV adoption, high grid investment.
By mapping strategies against these critical uncertainties, organizations avoid investing everything in a single outcome.
Scenario planning builds strategic resilience. It avoids that catastrophic blindness that crippled Blockbuster.
We also have to utilize powerful analytical tools like PESTLE analysis and the futures wheel.
PESTLE is a great reminder that technological change is never isolated. Technology is shaped, enabled, or killed by other factors.
Political, economic, social, legal, and environmental.
For example, a perfect autonomous driving system, the technology could be stalled indefinitely by public anxiety over safety, which is social.
Or gridlock on unified federal standards, which is political and legal.
A PESTLE analysis ensures you look holistically at the entire environment before you bet big on a new paradigm.
And the futures wheel.
That's a fantastic visualization exercise. You put the core paradigm shift in the center, say, widespread adoption of high-accuracy generative AI in business.
Then you brainstorm the direct effects.
Faster reports, better code.
Then the second-order effects.
Mass elimination of some entry-level knowledge jobs, but an increased need for AI governance roles.
And then third-order effects.
Changes in university curricula or even government discussions about a guaranteed minimum income. This prevents you from optimizing only for the immediate direct change.
So the most practical application of all this foresight work, especially for our audience, is what?
Creating early warning systems and tripwires. This moves anticipation from abstract discussion to quantifiable action.
You have to define measurable, predefined thresholds, tripwires, that if they're crossed, automatically trigger a strategic review.
Budget reallocation, an immediate pivot.
And
It takes the emotion and the politics out of the decision.
let's give some concrete examples for business and for career planning.
For a manufacturing company, a business tripwire might be: if the cost of 3D printing composite parts falls below the cost of traditional molding by 15%, we immediately launch a pilot program to shift 25% of our non-core supply chain.
It's a clear, data-driven trigger. And for you as an IS student,
You must define career tripwires. They force you into continuous learning. For example, if every entry-level IT job posting I see now requires proficiency in cloud certification X,
or if 50% of the articles I read cite prompt engineering as a necessary skill,
I will pivot 20 hours of my personal learning time per week to master that skill within the next 6 months.
you are using objective data to guide your professional development, staying ahead of your personal S-curve.
To manage the resource allocation for all this, organizations use the 3 Horizons model. This is a portfolio strategy framework designed to overcome the innovator's dilemma through disciplined resource allocation.
Horizon 1 is about optimizing and defending the current core business. That's today's profits.
Horizon 2 involves emerging growth opportunities, scaling ideas that are already proven but not yet mainstream.
And Horizon 3 is dedicated to nascent, disruptive, high-risk, long-term ideas, the weak signals.
And crucially, you have to allocate sufficient budget, even if it seems small initially, to Horizon 3. This ensures that when the paradigm shift arrives, you don't have to start from zero.
You already have an incubated capability.
Like Global Motors having a small, dedicated EV software team separate from their main combustion engine division.
And once you decide to act on a corporate or a personal level, you rely on established change management frameworks.
We mentioned Cotter's 8-step model, and its most critical first step in a paradigm shift is always creating a sense of urgency. You have to shatter complacency.
Global Motors couldn't just tell their executives they might need software excellence.
No, they had to demonstrate vividly, maybe through a terrifying security penetration test of one of their own vehicles, why mechanical excellence was no longer enough.
And why digital agility was the new necessary game for survival. Strategic foresight is the tool that gives you the facts you need to create that urgency.
So strategic foresight has to be an ongoing commitment. You have to cultivate those transferable skills, critical thinking, complex problem solving, effective communication that are valuable across any paradigm.
But you also have to continuously monitor those technical tripwires you define for your own career path, knowing exactly when to invest your time and money in mastering the next new technical skill.
That is how you ride the new S-curve to success.
This has been an extensive deep dive into the foundational dynamics of technological change. Let's recap the essential takeaways that will define your career in this digital era.
Remember that a paradigm shift, in the true Kuhnian sense, is a revolution. It's a fundamental replacement of the rules of the game, not just an upgrade.
And you must distinguish between the emotional roller coaster of hype, the Gartner cycle, and the real-world trajectory of performance and adoption captured by the S-curve.
The strategic lag between those two is the moment of truth for organizations and for careers.
And successful organizations, just like successful careers, must achieve ambidexterity, that critical ability to efficiently exploit current capabilities while proactively exploring new possibilities.
Global Motors' future depends on recognizing that success now hinges not on metal, but on digital intelligence and agility, balancing that revolutionary promise with operational risk.
Thank you for joining this deep dive. If you found this discussion helpful for your studies or your career planning, please take a moment right now to like, subscribe, and share this with others who are navigating the immense challenges of the digital era.
And remember to check the description for access to valuable resources, supplemental reading, and context that further support your learning journey.
Next time on the deep dive, we are digging into Chapter 3, Machines That Change the World.
We'll be moving from the abstract frameworks of change to the physical tools themselves, looking at the power of technological convergence, how different innovations collide and combine to create the essential infrastructure that enables the new paradigms we discussed today.
So before we sign off, here's something to think about. Consider the industry you want to enter, whether it's finance, healthcare, or manufacturing. What is the foundational assumption, the mechanical excellence, or the core asset of that industry right now?
And what single emerging technology has the power to destroy it and create a new paradigm? To find your personal tripwires for that field, that's something to mull over.
That's a wrap on this episode of Emerging Technologies and Innovation Strategy. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, every disruption starts with curiosity. Until next time, stay ahead of the curve.